Wherever you are in the world, welcome to another of my takes on China. And I've been asked this question many times. Jerry, do you think there'll be a war with China? And if you want to know why I think not, then watch on. But if you just want the answer, then in my opinion, you have it. The answer is no. There will never be a war with China. So if you disagree, stick with me. You might learn something. And if you'd like to know why I have this opinion, stick with me right to the end. And I think you'll understand. But also feel free to discuss this in the comments because it's just an opinion. First of all, a war with China will only happen if China participates in it. And let's be honest, if they haven't responded to all the provocation going on so far, they aren't going to. But there's a lot more to it than China's obvious patience and restraint. Slowly but surely, the US has come to the realization that it doesn't have the stomach for war. American mums and dads don't like to see flag-draped coffins, and if we really look at the history a little more closely, we'll find that Americans aren't very good at war. In the 1950s, they didn't win in Korea, and they left a divided country, still suffering the effects of that. In the 1960s, they struggled to land a decent force on Cuba, and they screwed that too. Now they have sanctions in place so they can point to how poor Cuba is, since they don't have US tourism. In the 1970s, they pulled out of Vietnam after losing 58,000 people and allowing the people to do exactly what they've been trying to do for 20 years, forming a communist republic. And guess what? Despite their misgivings, the Vietnamese are doing very well indeed, doing exactly what the US didn't want them to do, so well in fact that the US now wants to be their friend. Then they went into Iraq and Afghanistan. They're still in Iraq. Apparently they wanted a democratic government there. They got one, and now the democratic government has asked them to leave, but they don't want to leave. And they did leave Afghanistan though, in the same chaotic way they left Vietnam, in helicopters from the embassy roof. I could go on with Panama, Nicaragua, Syria, Libya, and so on. So many places they've entered, killed people, and left. But it isn't just that they aren't good at winning. They aren't good at any aspect of it. They're even worse at losing and terrible at doing what our parents taught us to do, be gracious in defeat. They created but now can't beat Al-Qaeda. They created the conditions for the emergence of but can't beat ISIS. And now because they want to goad China, they fund not only the military there, but also the flawed system of democracy in Taiwan. And don't get me wrong, the only reason Taiwan has a democracy is because the US government funds it through the National Endowment for Democracy. Wow. However, despite being really bad at it, the military-industrial complex wants more, and that group of companies needs it to survive. So the US have found a better way. They call it the proxy war. Proxy wars are the answer for them. It doesn't matter if the war is never won. It's very good for the shareholders and it keeps the industry alive. US bodies don't return home except for those foolish enough to think war is glorious and sign up for $2,000 a day plus benefits that they may never live to collect. But now there's another problem. Proxy wars aren't as popular as the US would like them to be. Ukraine has been a meat grinder for both sides, but forget about numbers, they're never accurate, and no matter what they end up being, there are already far too many. That proxy war has benefited the US, there's no doubt, but while the US wanted someone to weaken Russia, it's fair to say that the Ukrainians were the right people for the job. They were easy to encourage because they were defending their own land. But China's a very different story. If the US wants volunteers to help weaken China, that's going to be a harder sell. They've been doing the rounds of Vietnam, the Philippines, Japan, South Korea. They're a shoo in some of those places. They have large US military presence anyway. The US hope Australia will join. But the bottom line is, it's not only the largest export, it's the largest supplier to Australia. They'll be going to a war which is already a costly exercise, but will immediately lose nearly 40% of all their imports and exports. China isn't going to buy or sell to a country that's declared war on them. If they go looking for another partner, they've got to remember that BRICS, BRI, SCO, RCEP, ASEAN, they're all about trade. And China is either a founder member or the largest partner to each. Which country would go up against that at the behest of the USA? If the proxies haven't already realized that Ukraine is an example of how the US will support them to the end, only to declare 2 years later that they're near the end of their rope, then surely one look at their own trade situation would be a wake-up call. They'll be purchasing billions of dollars of US equipment while losing billions of dollars of exports to their major trading partners. They need to ask themselves two questions. Will the USA give me all the military material we need for free to fight this war on their behalf? And will the USA pick up all the slack from the loss of trade with China? The answer to both is almost certainly no. So each of the proxies can expect to welcome home flag-draped coffins by the thousands, pay through the nose for the privilege. And this is why I don't think there will be a war with China or a proxy war. If they can't get the proxies to fight it, there'll be no war. The US aren't going to do this on their own. A little known fact is that during the Vietnam War, 42,000 people deserted and 125,000 people fled to Canada to avoid it. Most rich kids deferred rather than fought, and none of those embarrassing stats is going to change. The USA currently has a recruitment shortage. It's likely the only people they'll get to fight for them will be the homeless, the destitute, and the desperate. A war might empty prisons. It could help the immigration crisis. It might be good for their poverty statistics, and who knows, it could put an end to the huge number of gun deaths on the streets, only to replace them with gun deaths in Asia. But the situation would be very, very different inside China. Every man, woman, and child would be willing to defend against an attack because they remember well what attacking forces are capable of. So USA can't handle a war with China. China won't start a war with the USA. The US can't find people willing to die for their profits, and if they did, these people, should they be lucky enough to return, will return with disabilities, PTSDs, living in a US-induced economic depression. It just is not worth it. That's why I think there won't be a war, any war with China, war or through China. See you next time. Bye for now.